Hey guys, it's Get Metabolic Friday. I'm leaving the office here and I tried doing this video before, but it went a little long. It's a pretty heavy topic that I'm going through today. But while we're doing this video, I want you guys to know that this is going to be kind of a heavy topic and a little emotional for some, and very informative for others. I'm going to start off with the informative stuff to get things started. So the idea that I wanted to get across to everyone today has to do with metabolic flexibility. Let me get this seatbelt on. There we go. So metabolic flexibility has a lot to do with how and when we can use what type of energy. So whether we're going to use glucose or fat for our dominant source of energy. Now I'm going to use the examples on when and how we can use energy with track and field. I used to be a track athlete. Was my favorite thing to do when I was in high school, or one of the favorite things to do. It's kind of hard to say which one do you love more, because I loved football, I loved wrestling, and I loved track. But we're going to use track as our example here, okay? So with that being said, there are events in track that require short bursts of energy that are only a couple seconds long. And like shot put, javelin, high jump, long jump, triple jump, pole vault, things like that, right? Now those are being used up in a matter of only a few seconds. Now those few seconds that we're using those, there's an energy system that actually does no calorie requirement for those couple seconds. We're not burning anything. All we're using is a system called the creatine phosphate system. Okay, and that creatine phosphate is so that the phosphorus on that creatine gets borrowed to be given to something called adenosine diphosphate to then become adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. And this all happens inside the cell, and it happens really quick and gets used up really quick. But that's why it's only good for maximal effort and a short burst of energy. Okay. Now, the next energy system is going to be caloric. It's going to burn some calories to it, and it will still be without the presence of oxygen. Sorry, I forgot to mention that that first one was not in the presence of oxygen. So anaerobic. Okay. And we're going to use track events similar to the 100 and the 200 meter race. And they're so quick and fast, and you're using sugar, and the creatine phosphate system has already been burnt out. But you're using sugar, and your byproduct at that point is going to be ATP, what you want, which is the cell energy, and lactic acid, which when that builds up, and you run out of the sugars fast enough, and your heart rate's so fast that you burn out of this really quick, and you hit the wall, is what we called it in track. Okay. Now, next energy system is going to be aerobic glycolysis, or we're breaking glycolytic, or glycolysis is lysis is breakdown, glyco is for sugar. So we're breaking down sugar still, but now we're doing it aerobically in the presence of oxygen. Now we're looking at something that's like 1 to 2 laps, maybe up to the mile. So we're looking at the 400, 800, and the 1600 race, or 1500 race, depending on how fast you're running this thing and how competitive you are. Now, this is still only sugar usage. Okay, we're not burning fat in these races at all. In order to get to the fourth form of energy production that our cells use to make ATP, something called beta oxidation, and that's when we get to burn fat. Beta oxidation is using fat. Okay, so as we're burning fat, it requires you to become dominant at using the beta oxidation. You need to be active for more than 10 minutes at a certain heart rate during activity, which is about 60% of your max total heart rate. So if this is what jogging is good for, longer distances, walks, hikes, bike riding, this is why they are usually recommended for the best source of fat burning. Okay. Now that we're talking about fat burning, and we've talked about in recent weeks this whole topic of insulin resistance and how insulin resistance prevents us from using energies at certain times. Now I'm going to get back into this fat burning use, because in order to use fat as a dominant energy source, especially from our fat stores, there is a very important enzyme that releases the fat from our fat cells. It's called hormone sensitive lipase. But the reason why it's hormone sensitive, the hormone that it's sensitive to is insulin. And if there is the presence of insulin, this enzyme, hormone sensitive lipase, turns off, which then turns off the ability to break down the fats within inside the fat cells, and so they become unavailable. So if we have too much insulin too often, because it turns off this hormone sensitive lipase, and you're trying to lose weight and burn fat, but you have hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance because you are hyperinsulinemic, you can't use your fat. So the whole idea of calories in, calories out has become a futile point, because yeah, you try to burn more calories than you put into your body, but it's really easy to put that weight back on because you're insulin resistant and you're hyperinsulinemic the rest of the time because you're eating too frequently and too high of insulin response to those foods. So you can see the conundrum that we're talking about here now. Now, getting into energy use, now if we're finally into that point where we have low amounts of insulin, we can now use our body fat. Now, if we're using our body fat for energy, we're not using glucose. That's good, right? We're becoming insulin sensitive again. Once we're insulin sensitive again, then insulin resistance is not an issue for you at that moment. Now, you can retrain yourself to become insulin resistant again, but we're going to do these habits for the rest of our lives, right? With adherence and availability from last week. Now, there's a couple different analogies that I want to use in today's video. The first one is you can't have your cake and eat it too. Now, somebody broke this down to me to have greater meaning. I always thought of it as this cliche that you say anytime somebody wants something but they can't have it. So you say it to them and you're like, oh, you can't have your cake and eat it too. And somebody broke it down and said, if you're in possession of that cake, you have it, right? But if you eat it, you no longer possess that cake. So what that means is that you can't have it all, right? You can't possess something and then use it to where you don't have it anymore. And that's the issue, okay? So we want to eat and do these things that we find enjoyable. But at the same time, you can't have health at that same time and expect to be healthy. And if you want to be healthy and have all those things at that same time, it's going to be detrimental. Okay, let me turn on a light here because my light focus is not reacting to the fact that the sun is going down. Thank you, fall and winter, right? Anyhow, so the second analogy that I'm wanting to get into here is that we want to use an analogy based off of, if you're a parent and you have a sick child, and you take that sick child to the doctor and to the hospital, and you run all these specific specialized tests. You do blood work, you do urinalysis, you do hair sampling, you do cancer screening, you do heart health stuff where you take blood pressures, and you do hematocrits, which is where they prick your finger and they see what your blood concentrations are at when it comes to hydration and red blood cell count, and all these different tests, MRI, CTs, CAT scans, the works. And the kid's still sick and the doctors can't find the answer. So they're like, well, maybe it's an allergy. So they send you to an allergist. And the allergist says, oh, I know what the answer is. They're allergic to the pet. You guys have a pet? You pick your pet, whether it's a dog or a cat. We're just going to call it a pet, okay? And now you have to go and you have to tell your child that that pet is making them sick. Okay? Now you're in my position Imagine that I'm the doctor telling you, the sick person, that I'm trying to tell you that there's something that you deeply love and that you've had since the day you were born. You got that pet the same day that child was born, okay, in this analogy. And that child doesn't know life without that pet. And me, the doctor, the parent, and you, the patient, or the sick person, are the child, and I'm trying to tell you that there's something out there that's making you sick that you could do without, that would make you healthier, and you'd be able to enjoy life a lot more, and heck, that might even save your life. And yet you have to make that hard decision on whether that thing that you love is actually important enough that it's more important than your own personal life. Okay. So what I'm trying to get at is that insulin resistance is making you sick. Okay. And there are certain things that you're doing right now that are leading to hyperinsulinemia, which is leading to insulin resistance and taking you away from insulin sensitivity, and is preventing you from actually using your stored body fat. And that is leading you towards diabetes and hypertension. Those are the top 3 leading comorbidities that people are dying from COVID with. It's not how old they are. It's not their blood type. It's not their ethnicity. The people that have these ethnicities and stuff, they're just being predisposed because culturally they're set up to fail because their culture has told them that these are the types of foods that we always eat. Why do they always eat them? Because culturally they were held back and they didn't have access to the good foods that were going to keep them healthy. But now we're in a situation where a lot of these foods are available, and the people that have affluence and stuff are eating these things, and they think that we have this healthy user bias, but we're starting to get sick people that are thought to be healthy because they were skinny. It's all due to insulin resistance, and it all goes back to too much sugar all the time. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Sometimes you're that child, and there's a pet that you love that you're going to have to get rid of because it's making you sick. I told you and I warned you ahead of time. This is going to be some pretty heavy stuff that we're talking about today, but it all comes from love, and it comes from a sincerity that I know that these are things that I've experienced for myself and that I've been able to overcome. I was on the brink of being obese. I was overweight. I had 29 BMI and at least 29% body fat. And I still have hypertension. I'm still working on the hypertension. And I know that I was probably pre-diabetic because I had all these other symptoms that were telling me that pre-diabetic was probably in my place, in my health. I can honestly say I'm no longer overweight. My body fat content is probably down to about 14. It could be 13 right now, but I know it's at least at 14% body fat, which is a healthy place to be. I don't have any of the symptoms and signs of insulin resistance on a daily basis like I used to anymore. I have all the energy in the world that I want, and now I'm just trying to overcome this hypertension. So I'm still sick, but I'm not as sick as I once was, right? And I'm still practicing these things to overcome that hypertension. You too can do this, okay? Subscribe to this channel. More information is going to come up about how we can overcome insulin resistance and how we can overcome metabolic syndrome and metabolic sicknesses, and so that you too can start using these habits that I'm doing that I know that you can do too. All right, I'm going to be signing off here. Subscribe to this YouTube station. Also, share it with other people. Maybe they need this too, or maybe it's a loved one that's sicker than you or just as sick as you, and you guys can do this together and find a tribe in your own. And then also that we can also put this on Instagram and Facebook and share it on Twitter, all these other different social media platforms. I'll catch you guys next time on Monday. Look forward to Get Motivated, and also on Tuesday to hashtag IFNSTL, and next Wednesday is going to be Get Moving. All right, take care, guys.